Hello, everyone. I'm looking forward to spending the next 40 minutes with you talking about my favorite topic, manufacturing. Worked in the industry for about 35 years, and now we're seeing an acceleration and really big effort. I mean, we're really seeing unprecedented geopolitical, economic issues that are hitting the manufacturing industry. And so I have three great panel members here who are going to talk through what they're doing. And the whole idea is everybody's in a different place. It's a very broad topic, but everybody's taking initiatives to either deal with cost of goods sold issues, sourcing, supply chain. I mean, we all have felt the choke points of the digital supply chain and just-in-time manufacturing models. So our panels are going to talk through what some of the things they're doing actively today, what are some of the transformation initiatives, and how they're really leveraging some of the smart manufacturing and digital services tools to help go after those challenges. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce. We've got Frank Antonysamy. He's from Hitachi Vantara, Chief Digital Solutions Officer. We've got Maher Al-Haffar, Strategy Planning and Office of CEMEX. And we've got Vic, who's from International Flavors and Fragrances, right? And they're going to go ahead and talk through first starting point of what is a key initiative, because everybody's in a different place. What are they doing at their companies today? Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. Good morning, everybody. Frank Antonysamy with Hitachi Vantara. And for those of you not familiar with Hitachi, around a $85 billion Japanese conglomerate, large businesses in what we call social infrastructure, which is around transportation, energy, manufacturing. And as we look at each of these businesses, we see massive transformation in these businesses, right? If you look at transportation, we run the bullet trains in Japan, some of the high-speed trains in Europe. And it's not just about running trains, but the track record of safety, the transition into more sustainable forms of transformation, that is driving a lot of focus and transformation in that industry. Right? In our energy business, we have close to 30% of the high-voltage transformers in the electric grid today are Hitachi transformers. And these are not just hardware equipment anymore, right? Because if you look at all of the changes in the grid that's forecast that we're facing today and also for the next few years and decades, the fundamental way in which the grid is going to perform is going to change, right? The grid used to be unidimensional. You just consume power off it. Now, with EVs also having the ability to contribute back into the grid, or even the solar panels generating electricity and contributing back into feeding back into the grid, there's a lot of software-driven innovation that's happening in these grids. The same thing with manufacturing. And when we look at our businesses, we said, how do we look at manufacturing as a competitive differentiation? A lot of investments in digital in this industry has been made initially in the customer-facing transactions, right? The CRM systems, the supply chain systems. And I would even say that the core manufacturing systems have been underinvested in when it comes to true digital transformation. We see this as an area that we could leverage, invest, understand, build the expertise, and then share it with the industry. And we focused on doing this in one plant in Japan. This is a control systems plant, and we kind of built one of the there are 60 plants that the World Economic Forum certifies as lighthouse factories, right? These are lighthouse factories which bring in automation, robotics, manufacturing, and the digital capabilities together into a singular form, and can be a template for other manufacturing companies to learn from and adopt, right? So our focus has been on that. We created that template with this factory in Japan called Omika Works, and then leveraging that, and the learnings from that is being implemented in our other factories, but also we are monetizing that expertise for our customers. So that's our focus, looking at manufacturing as a competitive differentiator and advantage.
Okay, all right, thank you, thank you. Maher?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here with you, and I feel a little bit in kind of a funny position having two CIOs on each side. I'm in the CFO finance business, and I took my position literally at the beginning of COVID. And CEMEX is, we're in the building materials industry, which happens to be the industry that has the lowest digital adoption probably of any industry, which from my perspective spelled of a lot of opportunity. And so when I first joined, literally June 2020, very quickly we realized that COVID is a major transformation power and force in our industry. And while we've been digital quite a bit, we've augmented our digital transformation back 5 years ago by introducing an industry-first e-commerce platform that is B2B. Fortunately, that platform was developed in 2017, kind of matured by 2020, and it was the perfect thing to kind of deliver a human touch at a distance to our customers. And we went from kind of almost nothing happening on that platform to now 60% of our sales are actually taking place on that e-commerce platform. And then in 2020, we kind of looked at COVID and we decided to see, okay, how do we start focusing on our shared services area to integrate that into the e-commerce platform. And there we focus kind of on three areas. Number one, technology. We decided to expand our digital strategic partners. We went from having one in the prior few years to 7 providers. We realized that obsolescence in technology, or let's say the life cycle of technology processes, have shortened quite a bit. So we needed to partner up with several partners, and we needed to make sure that we could over time evolve with either new partners or certainly evolve the relationships with the partners that we have now. And we focused on mission critical processes like customer support, finance. We focused also on procurement, P&IT, all of the information technology processes, as well as HR. And in different stages of maturity in each one of these situations, we went from being super manual to very technologically wired. And digitalization for us was not just taking the same processes and digitalizing them, but redesigning a lot of these processes. And we started this journey, and again, this is not paid advertising, but we started this journey by partnering up with many of the folks that are here in the room, and Avasant helped us kind of wade through this stuff through a very thorough process of benchmarking and also thinking through the process with our teams. And then what we did is we also took advantage of the COVID situation by changing our operating model and shared services into virtual delivery centers. So we're consolidating. We were very regionally oriented, had 4 regions around the world. We're consolidating everything into essentially 2 virtual delivery centers, consolidating people, and taking advantage of the best resources around the world virtually as a consequence of that. And then the third element that we brought in is innovation. We realized very quickly that there's no way that as a company, not being digitally native, we're going to be able to innovate as much, as fast, and cost effectively on our own. So one of the elements of the strategic partners that we had of the portfolio of seven strategic partners is specifically focusing on how do we actively have a conversation with our partners to bring in innovation through our processes. And we're bringing things like cognitive analytics. We're bringing in workflow processes, for instance. One of the things that we've adopted throughout the whole company now, after a lot of, you can imagine, friction, is ServiceNow, for instance, as the digital workflow process for all of the things that I mentioned earlier, which is an easier said than done. I mean, it took us almost 6 to 9 months to convince people to be on that. And just to give you an idea of the magnitude of the change that has taken place by doing that, and we went from having a lot of tasks that are being done and initiated through emails, through WhatsApps, followed up with calls or shoulder taps when we were all in the office. All of a sudden, by putting all of this and redesigning these processes and putting them on a platform like ServiceNow, You know, we essentially are looking, we went from 0 to almost 15,000 transactions a week. And we're looking at upscaling to close to 30,000 per week. Now, if you just do the math, 30,000 a week, that's almost 1.5 million transactions a year. Each one of these transactions have several data points attached to it. All of a sudden now we're looking at millions of data points that were lost, now they're being captured. And the ability to use you know, analytics in all forms, I'm not going to go into details, it's going to help us have, you know, lower cost, much more transparency, better accountability, and you know, ultimately at the end of the day, I mean, we're able to cut out almost, you know, within the next 24 months, we're going to be saving ourselves almost $100 million a year. You know, which is translating to, you know, a very important value creation for the enterprise.
Okay, great. Okay. Vic?
Hi, everyone. Good to be here, and good morning. It's good to be back in Southern California. I actually went to USC here, business school, so it's always a good opportunity when I get to come back and visit some old friends. So a little bit about IFF is probably one of these companies you never heard of. It's headquartered in New York City. We're about a little over $12 billion in annual revenue. We're the largest flavors, fragrances, ingredients company in the world. And we recently just did a merger with a big part of DuPont. So DuPont spun off their health and biosciences business. And IFF acquired that in 2020. So we literally acquired it in February of 2020. And then March, you guys know what happened, okay? And so this is the largest merger in our industry. So when we think about it, we really were challenged. We're saying, okay, we just kicked off a major merger. We have 170 different manufacturing sites to connect and to figure out, you know, how do we consolidate that footprint? What does it look like? What do the supply chains look like? We ended up with 50 different ERP systems. So that in itself can tell you a big story. Okay, so 50 ERPs running 170 different plants, very different footprint from a manufacturing perspective. You know, we're essentially a specialty chemical company. And now we're also going to be taking on biological components, fermentation for probiotics. We're one of the largest probiotic makers in the world as well. And, you know, our brands, I can't tell you our brands because we don't have brands. What we do is we sell to the most iconic brands in the world, all the largest CPG companies in the world, you know, from fine fragrance to soaps, laundry detergent, air fresheners, you name it, even cool things like smells of hotels that are unique. We do signature smells for them. Stars. I can't even tell you all the different movie stars who walk through our offices saying, hey, I want my fragrance to be so-and-so. You see the commercial for it. So it's a fun place to work, really interesting place to work, but lots of challenges ahead. So as we really kicked off the integration, we really understood from a technology perspective, we are the backbone of making this thing work. And so we're still in it. It's a multi-year journey as a multi-billion-dollar acquisition. You know, as I think about it, we broke the problem down into components from the technology angle, but really trying to understand what are the business outcomes. And again, I go back to first principles around what are the business outcomes that we want to really achieve here. And so as we started breaking down the problem from a business outcomes perspective, which is around, you know, we had promised the street revenue synergies, cost synergies. There's a growth component to it. So all of these things have to be then translated into systems work, consolidation work. I will tell you, the only way that we are seeing the opportunity to really seize all of these synergies that we talked about and really the growth opportunities is really leveraging digital in a different way, in a transformational way. And that really has to be incrementalism in certain cases works, and this is what we've done. We've kind of compartmentalized where incrementalism would work. And in other places, we really need to think about how do we blow this up? Because essentially we're a B2B company. And so we have to think about where are the opportunities to do something slightly different. And we'll go over through some of these as we go forward through the conversation here. But for us, on top of the pandemic, integration, inflationary challenges, you can see the raw material increasing. And we're a very energy intensive because we have complex chemical process manufacturing. So these are large scale facilities spread out over the world. Logistics costs, energy costs, raw material costs. And our raw material costs in some cases are quite unique. I'll give you one or two examples and we'll move on. So as an example, Madagascan vanilla. Okay, so we have to farm that comes from the farms. So when you can't get boats to pick it up from Madagascar, guess what? That's an issue. And then we pride ourselves on the highest ingredient qualities as we ship to products out for different customers. So we have that. We have, in various parts of Africa, we have now, because of the pandemic, local economies have collapsed in certain cases. So you have these gangs who actually own fields of locust bean gum, and locust bean gum goes into a lot of stuff. So it's quite interesting. It's not the standard stuff that you hear about. So we have to really think about how do we get information, how do we plug it into our supply chain thinking, how does that impact manufacturing? So there's a lot of complexity here, but we're excited to share a little bit more with you today.
Yeah, so I know we spent quite a bit of time on the companies, but it just gives you a feel for the spectrum we're talking about when we say manufacturing and smart manufacturing. You know, depending on the company, you're all at different places, and you need to embrace the technology to solve the problems. So the key is really understanding your digital journey and where you are on that journey to fully leverage some of the new technologies and capabilities out there. So I'm going to just due to time, I want to get focused on smart manufacturing. And Vic, why don't you talk about maybe a couple of examples of where you're really using some of the new technologies, you know, Internet of Things, analytics. Where are you and where have you seen them very effective?
Yeah, so one of the examples that we can talk about in the manufacturing footprint is we're really looking to increase capacity. So what happened with COVID is all of a sudden people started realizing they have to take care of themselves and they have to be healthy. And so what that drove is all of a sudden there was a big spike in demand for probiotics. People wanted to start taking probiotics. Many of you take probiotics on a daily basis. So that demand spiked. So our footprint is fixed. So how do we get more capacity out of the footprint when we see demand is spiking? We want to take advantage of the demand spike and capture that revenue. So we started implementing different IoT type of devices. And IoT, again, talking about various different flow sensors, chemical sensors in the processes. We also started to decompose where we had root cause problems in the manufacturing. So going back to Six Sigma principles, lean manufacturing, finding the constraints in the model, applying digital capabilities there, really pulling all that sensor data back into a big AWS data lake that we had, and applying different technologies like Snowflake, in-house capabilities around AI, really trying to extract out. I can tell you at the end of the about 8 months worth of effort in various what we call lighthouse facilities that we took examples on, we increased capacity by 20 to 30%. And that was a big deal. And all it required was really us focusing. The challenge in many companies, you don't have energy to focus in one area, but this problem made it very acute, and we focused in on that space.
Thank you. Thank you. Frank, how about you? Do you have a specific example where you've demonstrated the value that you can get from smart manufacturing? I know you talked about implementing and scaling up, but do you have a specific example you'd like to share?
Yes, I do. And a lot of it is very similar to what Vic was talking about, where the demand cycles are very flexible and your supply cycles are not very reliable as well, right? So the focus for us then became, how do we build resilience into our supply chain, right? And supply chain all the way from your demand sensing to manufacturing to distribution, right? All elements of this, we need to make sure that we're building resilience into it. Marie, you mentioned about JIT when you started it, right? Most of us in manufacturing grew up as saying just-in-time inventory is the holy grail, right? There's, in fact, boastful comments about how just-in-time you were, and was it days and hours and so on. The one thing that the pandemic taught us is that what used to be true in terms of the holy grail of how you're running supply chains is not true anymore, right? And therefore, how configurable, what are your alternatives, how resilient is your supply chain became a critical priority for us. And what we, and I'll talk about the Omega works as an example, what we're speaking about. We realized that your production has to be configurable, right? Because the products, and Vic, you spoke about the spike in probiotics, right? In the industrial manufacturing setting, that's the same context, right? So when you have a spike in different products, your factory footprint is the factory footprint, right? The physical plant layout, there's only so much you could do and change and configure. So we came up with a very proprietary distributed software network where we could reconfigure the production lines based on what the demand sensing was, right? So what would take us a couple of quarters to reconfigure the physical layouts, we could actually boil it down into a few weeks in which this reconfiguration is done. Because the physical layout, there still are changes, right. But a lot of this is about how is the control network and how configurable is your software network that is defined to be able to do this. That gave us almost a 50% acceleration in time to market for the products that we were looking at, right? When you couple that with the quality expectations, right? Because you could, if you're moving products out faster, you don't want to do that with a compromise in quality, right? So you want to then have a framework that looks at a few things, including your overall equipment efficiency, yield, and quality, and build a template that while your production is reconfigured and changes, your outcomes on quality and yield and your OEE is predictable, and that is still driving it, right? So that required us to many different capabilities and technologies, including 5G, data, AI, and a big part of it is how we are leveraging the cloud for it, right? So we had to build cloud-native applications, and manufacturing is reluctant to go into cloud-native applications, right? Because while a lot of 5G and communication capabilities was driven by, again, consumer-facing apps, right? We're all comfortable with ordering cabs and food on the mobile phone. But when it came down into the resilience of communication to run mission-critical applications on any of these, on manufacturing, on transportation, this is where the advancements that have been made in 5G becomes extremely useful, right? Because 5G, if you look at it, and there's a great session yesterday about how the gentleman from Qualcomm is talking about there are 3 layers of 5G, right? First is the mobile broadband, which you can stream things faster on your mobile phone, which is really cool. And the second and third layers are about how do you make that the bandwidth available in industrial settings and mission-critical settings. We've seen that. We've got a lab set up in Santa Clara where we have our own 5G spectrum. We are able to research the use cases that we need and then quickly adopt it in our plants globally, right? So the coming together of cloud and 5G and IoT to drive the resilience and flexibility in supply chain has been very useful for us.
So when you look at manufacturing, and so as you guys were saying, really, the analytics, the internet, being able to know what's happening in a facility in context of the overall supply chain, and with all the technology coming on board that's more and more flexible and reliable, how do you convince our operations leaders that, hey, you've got this asset base in your current technologies, this is an opportunity to move to something new, something more resilient, something more flexible, but guess what? You're carrying the costs of an existing asset. Vic, Frank, any ideas there as to how we deal with those?
Yeah, I think maybe Marie, you're referring to maybe change management, right? Questioning the as is usually the $64,000 challenge, right? And fortunately, in our case, we ushered in this change along with COVID. So it was very difficult for people to say, well, I need to have the guy next to me or the person next to me or whatever. So it happened, we were all kind of away and the paradigm kind of completely shifted away from us. But having said that, the biggest challenge is having a sponsorship at a very senior level within the company. In our case, I mean, literally we had to go convince our CEO first and then go to our exco and convince them second. And then with the use of our partners, work together with a lot of the folks that are going to be recipients of these new processes and new technologies, getting them on board, and really, I think it's communication. I mean, I can't understate the importance of making sure that you have a very professional, very thorough, very persistent communication process that is showing the audience, showing the stakeholders how valuable is this new technology and how is it going to make their life better. And I think the best component in addition to technology is making the new change be delightfully addictive. I think that's really important. I mean, you can promise a lot of things and all of that, but people at the end of the day want to see this thing work and make their life easier. And that's a very important part, at least from my perspective, maybe not at the micro level of the implementation of the technology.
What do you think, Vic? Yeah.
So, I mean, I mentioned earlier about a lighthouse project. So what we do is and again, IT, OT for large-scale manufacturing is really important to have alignment. So at the top level, how do you get alignment? It's not easy. Change management, 100% agree with you. But what we have done in a couple of cases is we actually develop what we call lighthouse projects. And as we think about these projects, what we do is we make sure we're touching every single layer that we go through, really end to end. And one of the things that we realize is how we structure the team around common outcomes is super important. So for our manufacturing lighthouse project, again, using digital analytics in terms of taking in the data, we had to create a new construct for the team. We actually had to put in IT folks, engineers, data engineers, analytical capabilities, along with the process manufacturing engineering capability. So we created an agile construct, and the agile construct really helped to move things along, versus to say, I'm working in my silo and you're working in your silo. No, it's really one team with one outcome, and that really was very, very supportive for us as we move forward.
So were you able to take and get your lighthouse and then scale that up to other facilities? Was that,
yeah.
I mean, did that team stay intact to help you bring it or bring others along?
Yeah, so what we did was another opportunities, as I mentioned, we had 170 plants, but not all of them are created equal. So we prioritized against those plants, which ones have the highest margin opportunity, the greatest revenue impact. And then what we did was we did the lighthouse or two against that, took the learnings from those lighthouses, and then put it against, again, you created a Pareto essentially, say, hey, the top 20% are going to drive 80% of the value here, and now we're beginning that journey to move that forward. But that's how we're doing it.
Okay. Hey, we're quickly running out of time, believe it or not, but I wanted to save 1 minute for each of you, kind of a speed round, kind of, what would you like to say? What one point would you like the audience to take away on your digital journeys?
From our perspective, it is data, right? A lot of the analytics, you can have informed decision making, your next best actions, all of that when you have the right access to the right data. And often it is not lack of data, but it is access to the right data, right? And Vic spoke about IT and OT. The IT data, we have access through the data lakes, but the industrial data lakes that are needed, right? We are focusing a lot on making sure that there is a singular view of data across the supply chain, whether it is in the data centers of the IT systems, the production floor, and the OT systems, but also the supply chain, right? The Madagascar vanilla. How do we tap into the data that is out there in the field and have a single view where the right decision making can drive the decision? So that's our focus.
Okay. All right. Maher?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, at CEMEX, I mean, we believe two things are going to make an enterprise sustainable: addressing climate action and being digital and innovation, right? So to me, I would advise everybody, and it was a scary process for me when we embarked on this, but be ambitious, because the organization is going to push back and it's going to downsize your ambition. So try to overachieve, and then you will have a negotiation back within the organization. But the most important thing is that if you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it either to you or for you. And so we can't afford that. So ambition and having a bigger picture, and also having partners. I think it's very important to have partners to accelerate that journey and to increase the probability of success in the journey.
Beck?
Yeah, I mean, basically everything these guys said is a thumbs up for me, because we're doing that as well. But if I look at how we're structuring, right, end to end is super important. And I think what I find across so many companies, industries, they end at their job title. Okay, I only do this, but that's not how money gets made. It's at the end of the day, it is complete end-to-end ownership. And so as we look at the manufacturing space, okay, I can release capacity through IoT mechanisms here, but then I need the central digital control tower, which is all the supply chain, S&OP, all of those process dynamics there. Then that has to be linked to the ERP, and how we connect all the dots is super important. So I would say that's really important, end-to-end thinking with the outcome in mind. And then the other last point I would make here is really what I said earlier around the team. You really have to think about a holistic way to pull all the folks together, be really clear that the outcomes of that team are together. And I really am a strong supporter of agile methodology and agile teams. I think they can really make a difference. And using lighthouse projects to get people excited about them and push them forward, I think is a good opportunity for all.
Okay. So with that, I want to thank the panelists. I'm going to leave you with a thought from a good friend. In order to thrive and survive, you're going to need to be able to have speed, flexibility, and quality manufacturing. So, you know, it's very key that we're able to leverage the technology out there to have an impact in these manufacturing facilities. Make them smart, not dumb, like we talked about yesterday, smart versus dumb, so that you can really position and target them where you need them, producing what you want, so that the whole supply chain can work well together, okay? And thank you very much. We hope you enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.